Welcome, everybody, to a very exciting week in the Reddit League. Uh, we had pretty much every rule under the sun come into play this week. But before we get into that, I am Zotomo, and I am joined today by Calamity.
Hello.
And our special guest is co-star, or as he's better known, Simi. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, another Division One player, joining us to chat about the ongoings in the Reddit League this week in Kyrgyzstan. So let's jump right into that Division One. Yeah, so Calamity, you'll notice there is a yellow 0 on the score sheet. Can you explain exactly what that means?
Yeah, the yellow zero in this case basically means that the person who got that yellow zero didn't play the match within the deadline. So he's got a yellow card, and he'll have to be careful because once you get 2 yellow cards, you're basically disqualified from the Reddit League, and all your results prior to that point will be voided.
Yeah, so certainly a little bit worrying for Equinox, but it does give Kevin Kroner his first win in the division. Yeah, so as we look at those results, what stands out to you, Calamity?
Yeah, Division 1, I feel like it didn't have the hardest of seeds, but anyone who puts in a performance of over 24,900 points in Kyrgyzstan on any seed has to have put in a lot of practice. So great work by Raidman, CG, and you, Simi, as well as Magyaron, who only fell slightly short of that mark. Studi and Verdok also put in solid performances, making their matches at least somewhat close, even if they couldn't pull off the win. And yeah, as you said, Kevin Kroner picked up his first win with an average score, mostly due to Equinox failing to play within the deadline, probably. And then we've got geography challenges with the sort of score I'd expect from a good player who didn't practice that much, and Comte Bilou, who seemed to give up halfway through the seed.
Oh, no. Yes, but Simi, that did give you a bit of an advantage in your matchup. How'd you feel that week went?
Yeah, I played really early, so it was kind of an intense anticipation, and yeah, it was an unfortunate game for Compilu. It's really a shame he kind of gave up, but overall, I'm honestly not disappointed. Sorry, honestly surprised at how the Chicago Geographer versus Chicago Challenges matchup went. Because Chicago Geographer, without any disrespect to him, is known mostly as an America player. So I didn't expect he to do that great in like a specific world map. But he smashed it, and yeah, so that was the biggest surprise of the week for me in this division, at least.
Very nice. Okay, well, let's look and see what that means for the Division One table. With that loss, actually, Scholdi, GC, and Equinox all picked up their first loss of the season. Equinox doing that on that yellow card. And Usimi had a massive swing in score differential with Comte Bilou's kind of rather lackluster score there. But not a whole lot of movement in the table. Otherwise, Schulde sitting at the top with 9 points, and Comte Bilou sitting at the bottom still with only 2. What is interesting to point out, though, is how close it is between first place to fifth place. Only 1 point separating all of those 5 players, so very tight. Yeah, Calamity, how is the Division One table shaping up to you?
Yeah, this week made everything a lot closer in the table. None of the top 3 managed to get any points. Funnily enough, this is the 3rd week in a row for Schludi where he gets the 6th best score of the division, and this time it's actually going to cost him that bonus point. There's only 3 points separating first to 8, so yeah, there's pretty much everything still on the cards for this one. And interesting about this division is that the top 4 player in terms of overall score are sitting in 4th, 5th, 7th, and 8th. So you can probably expect in the coming weeks to have the table be even closer or just completely flip.
Yeah, very, very tight indeed. Yeah, Simi, what do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting development. Like I think we're gonna see the table match mix up quite a lot after next week. since we had quite a bit of matchups when uh, very players with very impressive scores went up against each other and resulted in draws and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's gonna get mixed up quite a bit in next coming few weeks.
Yeah, next week in Pennsylvania is the midway for Division One with 10 players. So let's take a look at those matchups next. Yeah, Calamity, anything in particular interesting to you here next week?
Now, the two matchups that stand out straight away are, of course, Simi versus CG and Geography Challenges versus Equinox, both against Americans, and both are matchups. Equinox versus Geography Challenges very high up in the table, and Costa versus or Simi versus Chicago Geographer both very high in total score. And you kind of have to give the Americans a bit of an advantage considering you're playing Pennsylvania. But I don't know if that'll be enough to get a win, and whether that's actually going to be much of an advantage to begin with. And Kevin Krohn against Schludi could also be interesting, since they've been very close in terms of score so far, being less than 3,000 points apart in overall score. And Schludi also lives in Pennsylvania. So yeah, that could be interesting.
Although the flag doesn't show it, he's on a bit of a home turf there. Yeah, so Simi, how do you fancy yourself against Chicago here in this week?
Well, this is probably the matchup I'm most afraid of after Geography Challenges, because, as I said before, Chicago Geography is considered kind of an expert on North America. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be very tough. I normally tend to play very early, but I intend to do a lot of practicing this week, and we'll see where it goes.
Indeed, yeah, Chicago in particular. Most of his videos are about American locations, especially non-moving. So that will be interesting to see if that kind of pedigree pays off for him in week 5. Okay, well, let's move on to Division 2 and take a look at these scores for week 4. Yeah, so Simi, yeah, probably the most interesting thing here is that another draw uh, between Mr. Blue and I can never remember how to say his name. Stemphalix? Always think Giovanni.
Yeah, just call him
But
Giovanni.
yeah, Giovanni. So Simi.
Mr. Blue and Steam Felix have definitely emerged as the standouts. Um, yeah, and I've been very impressed, especially with Mr. Blue. I haven't really seen him around the community before. I've been never with Giovanni, but yeah, very interesting results. Um, what I also wanted to point out is I was surprised at how, I don't want to say poorly, but how RC did. Uh, because I know him to be a very good player, but he seems to be kind of struggling in the league so far.
Had a few unfortunate results, that's for sure. Calamity, your take on things?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Division 2 seed was that it had a round with very limited coverage, only allowing you to move a couple hundred meters in either direction. And you can clearly see in the results who knew that location, who didn't. With the exception of Seppo, everyone who got above 20,000 points got that location right, everyone below didn't. And 1v1 matchups are also being cruel yet again this week, as Scamry picks up 3 points with about 11,000 points, while Mr. Blue and Stymphalics get 2 for almost perfect scores. Great performances from Ice Thyra and Tall Impala as well.
Yeah, it's all about who you play when. It's not exactly about the score for sure. So let's see what that means for the Division 2 table. I believe not a whole lot changes at the top or the bottom. Tesco Tech, Mr. Blue, and Tall Impala all staying close to the top, with Slovak Goldie, Radox, and Blockchain Prenup staying close to the bottom. With that, a bit of movement in the middle of the table, though. A win by Ice Tower, of course, moves him up a bit. But Radu, with a loss, still keeps himself relatively high in the table at 5th. Still within striking distance of that first place and maybe even that second place automatic promotion spot. Yeah, so Simi, how is the Division 2 table looking?
Yeah, definitely. I think it aligns mostly with the results. I would definitely expect Team Felix to climb up to the table in the coming weeks with the kind of performances he had. Um, yeah, the nature of the matchups kind of makes it that the table doesn't really stay. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on the words, but on the word, but it tends to change around a lot as players face tougher opponents or weaker opponents. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, we're not quite to the midway point with 12 players in Division 2. It has an extra week on everybody else. Yeah, Calamity, your take on the table so far.
Yeah, the table is very volatile, which is, I think, what Simi wanted to express. The top two stay the same, but behind them, it's very close between third and ninth. Only 3 points, being being the difference between getting to take part in the promotion playoff and in the relegation playoff. At the bottom of the table, it's getting more and more difficult for Blockchain Prenup, Radox, and Slovak Goalie. But I can congratulate Icefaro for moving in the table for the first time in his Reddit League career.
Yeah, he had a couple good results, but just how everything else went around him was always keeping him in the same position. But finally eked out a place or two in the chart this week. Yeah, unfortunately for Radox, a friend of ours, towards the bottom, still yet to pick up a win. Same with Slovak Goalie. So we'll see maybe if they can pick up that win in Pennsylvania as we go into those matchups for next week. Simi, anything you're looking forward to seeing here?
I'm definitely looking forward to the Mr. Blue versus Redox matchup because Mr. Blue, we've seen a lot of impressive scores from him, and Redox, although he's not been doing great, he tends to play American maps a lot, so I can expect him to have some experience with this area. And I'm also looking forward to RC versus Tesco Tech, since we have an opportunity for RC to sort of prove himself on what is kind of an home turf, since he does live in America as well.
Yes, indeed. Calamity.
Yeah, it's not getting any easier for the bottom three. They're facing off against second, third, and fourth in the table this week. I kind of see the most hope for Slovak Goalie here, though, because he's been living in Pennsylvania for most of his life, and Skamri hasn't exactly put up amazing scores despite sitting in fourth in the table. That's our second game next to RC and Teskotak, where both competitors live in the US, even though they're not necessarily American. Icefire versus Seppo is also a matchup that we already know something about from last season, where Icefire won with a score differential about 4,000 in Bangladesh, though. So it's probably not something you can make many comparisons about in regards to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it is interesting that why do all these people live in Pennsylvania? What is so special about Pennsylvania? I don't know. I grew up on the West Coast, so I don't exactly have not too familiar with East Coast locations and reasons for expats moving there, but it's definitely an interesting place to live. Give it that. Yeah, definitely. Not any easier for Radox this week. Tall Impala probably has a pretty good shot. He'll put in the practice, I know, against a lower table opponent. But yeah, definitely the Radu and Tesco Tech matchup. Radu really looking to try to gain some ground on those top couple places there next week. All right. Well, let's take a look at Division 3 results from Kyrgyzstan. Again, here, Calamity, 2 yellows in this division.
Yeah, we've had Ijubak, who just, I don't know, we've not heard of him, so we don't know why exactly he missed his deadline. Redirect played a couple of hours after it, and he said it's not going to happen again. We'll see about that. But we've got a huge disparity in scores here. 5 people got over 17,000 points, and 4 didn't even cross the 4,000 point mark. This led to some blowout victories and only 2 pretty close games. One in the upper score ranges and one in the lowers, with M the Basement edging out Hu Alvara and MD Spaceman picking up his first points with the lowest score to give 3 points in the history of the Reddit League.
Not sure whether to be impressed or not, but a win's a win, my friend. So he'll be happy with those 3 points any way they come. Yeah, Simi.
Yeah, Freckles has had kind of an unfortunate game. I know he's been really busy recently, so he probably didn't have time to practice, and unfortunately, that's really crucial in Kyrgyzstan. So I think where most of these really low scores come from. Just people either not having the time or just choosing not to practice. And that applies in the opposite direction as well.
Indeed. Okay, so let's see what those two yellow cards in the division, as well as some really weird scores, play out in the table. Wizard, Wolf Tricker, and Calamity all keep their places at the top of the table with 12 points and 10 points, respectively. I do believe the baseman moves up a little bit there and Hugo as well, picking up a few extra points there to keep them in the middle of the pack. But yeah, Pork Steak still at the bottom with Theos. MD the Spaceman does move up a few points with that win, but still towards the bottom overall. Bag and Redirect still towards the middle despite those yellow cards, as long as they don't get a second. Uh, yeah. Yeah, so Calamity, you're still sitting in third, not able to move up yet.
Yeah, well, I'll hopefully be able to change that in the future. But I'll have to be careful because, as we've said, Ijuba, first yellow card. If he gets a second one, his results will be voided, so that's 3 points less for me. That wouldn't be good. But interestingly about this table is that now that we've had the draw between Stymphalics and Mr. Blue in Division 2 this week, Division 3 is now the only division, depending on if you count Division 4B as its own or as part of the 4th division, that hasn't had any draws yet. And we're starting to get far enough into the season where the table doesn't change drastically every week. It's been, as you've said, there's not been a lot of movement. M the Basement, Hugo Alvara swapped places, and Wakelock and MD Spaceman went up 3 and 2 spots respectively. I kind of want Wakelock to win next week by more than his score differential, purely for the sake of equilibrium, having the top half of the table with a positive and the bottom half with a negative score differential.
Yeah, Gwale Lizard and your score differential is getting up there over a game away, as well as Wolf Trekkers. So even if you get a 0, you're probably still going to have a positive score differential. Yeah, Simi, your thoughts on Division 3?
What I found interesting about Division 3 is that the top three of the leaderboard reflect the scores they've gotten so far, which is not necessarily the case in the upper two divisions. So I think that's kind of a bigger disparity between the skills or the experience of the players in this division.
Well, let's see if those two yellow card players can come back in good form in week 5 as we look at those matchups now. Calamity, what are you looking forward to seeing here?
Yeah, with a division that features 5 Americans, you'd expect at least 2 of them to play against each other in Pennsylvania. But alas, we do actually get 2 of them. I kind of didn't see that while looking at the matchups. We have Guelo Wizard against MD Spaceman here. But other than that, the other 3 facing off against, well, all Europeans actually, yeah. Or do they? No. Jubek probably won't be facing off against anyone if he doesn't come back.
Yeah, interesting.
After Wakelock's match versus MD Spaceman in week 3, we're getting the second iteration of 2 promotees playing against each other this week with Wakelock against Fios. The last one will come in week 10, incidentally. And now that he's finally gotten himself away from those pesky relegation spots, Wakelock will surely want to keep his run going. While Fios had quite the setback last week after finally getting his first win, being beaten by over 17,000 points in Kyrgyzstan, which was the 3rd highest loss of the week.
Yeah, Simi, your thoughts?
Well, the matchup I'm most looking forward to is probably Wolf Tracker versus M the Baseman, since those two players tend to put up pretty high scores. Neither of them is American, so neither one has an advantage. Also, Calamity versus Red City is going to be interesting, I think. Assuming he comes back, as well as Hugo Alvara versus Ajubek. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think Dem Freckles does have a pretty good chance of improving his lot in the table, given the fact that he's up against Pork Steaks. He's kind
Let
of
me
come a rough start so far,
let
but
me just quickly interrupt you, Zotomo, because
yeah.
you had one of the reasons why I just said that what I looked up was wrong was that you just mixed up two players in the matchups for next week there.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you need to swap around MD Spaceman and M the Baseman.
Oh, of
Uh,
course. Oh, I'm sorry about that. We'll get that fixed and
Yeah,
different,
so
and
so
we'll
no
take a look at
Americans playing
so.
each other.
So threw a little bit of a wrench in there for. Let me double check that. M the baseman plays. I did switch that around. Yeah, so no Americans do play each other. I just got those M something man's names mixed up in my head as I was moving those matchups around, but we'll get that fixed. Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, there is no American matchup, so we'll be very interested to see how those Americans do against each other in next week in Pennsylvania. See if that home field advantage pays off for them at all or not. Uh, let's move on to Division 4A. Now officially halfway through the season. Yeah, Simi, pretty much another low performance there by Nitnarok, the relegated player from Division 3 again this week.
yeah. The score differentials are pretty big this in this division, which I think it's understandable. Network is having a rough time so far. I'm pretty impressed by the performance from Patriots FTW. Really nice score there. Shows a lot of practice, definitely.
Nice, yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, Patriots winning the high-profile matchup of the week. Other than that, nothing really too interesting there. Mostly wins for the favorites. Back to smaller maps. So of course Nitnorok didn't win that one. And yeah.
Yeah, I managed to not give Lenovo Sucks his first win. Decent score by me despite one bad round in Kyrgyzstan. So happy with that. And let's see what that means for the table halfway through the season. Patriots does take that top place from Max FI with that win by only 1 point. So it's still very, very close. Noicel and Mobiles and me, even Nitnarok, all stuck very close. Only 2 points separating us between third and sixth. But NNZ not quite out of it yet with 3 points. But Lenovo Sucks still at 0 without a win in the division so far. So Simi, yeah, halfway through the season, any thoughts about maybe playoff finishes for these players?
Yeah, my personal prediction is that Patriots and Max are going to make it to playoffs. But I wouldn't discount Mebels as well as some other movements in the table. Unfortunately, I think the bottom two players are going to be having a rough time trying to make up points. But we'll see. There's always a chance for an upset.
Yeah, you never know. Calamity.
Yeah, despite how predictable the division might sometimes seem, it's still very close together in terms of points overall. But I still think, yeah, it's probably going to be Patriots who gets promoted, and then it's going to be a tough fight to see who is the one who has to miss out on the playoff spots.
Indeed, yeah. The second through fifth players in Division 4A go up against the second to fifth position in 4B, fighting for that final promotion spot between the 8 of them. So it'll be very hotly contested with that. But let's see who they will be facing off again next week in Pennsylvania. Yeah, so Simi.
I don't think the matchups here will be that surprising. I expect my Bills and Patriots to win against non-American opponents, as well as opponents that have tended to get lower scores. Um, Although I expect, based on the scores we've seen so far, I think Max is going to prevail over Lenovo, even though he's American. But it's also kind of a home turf, so it could be an opportunity for Lenovo to pick up the first win here. Uh,
Yeah, it would be a chance for him to pull a surprise victory or maybe even a draw against Max, take some points from one of the leaders in the table. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I agree with you on Patriots versus N and Zs. I'm not entirely sure on Mabos versus Neusel because I don't think that the advantage Pennsylvania gives you for being an American is that big. Uh, so I think that'll be a close game. And yeah, the other matchups are pretty predictable unless something widely unexpected happens.
Yeah, I'll hope to pick up a win against Nitnarok. But I think that's probably the biggest matchup of this week. Patriots and XFI playing against bottom position players, but is those other two matchups are in the middle of the table, which probably will decide some of those playoff seeds going into the playoffs for those players. And let's look at the other half of Division 4 in 4B and their results from week 4. Calamity, yeah, another strong showing by Deep Thought and Closed 24/7.
Yeah, it's been wins for the favorites all around, although I guess Papagato GRH77 didn't quite have a clear favorite going into it. Again, 3 losses for the 3 Americans, so they'll hope to change that in next week. But yeah, other than that, nothing really too unexpected. Steven putting in a relatively weak score. I might have expected a bit more out of him. But against Deep Thought, it was probably not going to be a win anyway.
Yeah, Steven, a relegated player from Division 3. So, if I'm not mistaken,
You aren't?
yes. So yeah, he'll be looking to bounce back from that rather poor showing in Kyrgyzstan. Simi.
yeah, I'm definitely impressed with Default's results so far. Definitely shows a lot of promise, and I think he's gonna head off into the playoffs against Closed. Definitely, at least based on what we've seen.
Okay, let's see what this means for the Division 4B table. After the midway point, a closed 24/7 sitting at top with 12 points, but right on his heels are Deep Thought and Ed Boris with 10 apiece. Papagato and Steven still sitting in the middle of the pack with H-Town, GRH, and that one World Girl rounding out. That one World Girl still looking for her first win at 0-4 at the bottom. Everybody else having at least one win for that. And I just noticed a mistake again. Anyway, moving on. Calamity, what do you think about maybe the playoff spots in Group B?
Yeah, the top 3 are distancing themselves from the other 5 quite a bit, and as I've been saying pretty much every week so far, that gap's probably only going to get bigger. It's probably going to be a fight between those 3, and it'll depend on how they play against each other to see who will get that guaranteed promotion spot and who will have to go through the playoffs.
Indeed. Simi.
Yeah, basically, I agree with Calamity's thoughts. I think we can see some. We're gonna see some movement between these 3, but I don't know. I'm predicting Default or Closed will come up on top.
Okay, very nice. Well, let's see what the last Division 4B players will be doing in Pennsylvania, those matchups. So Calamity, anything that might be important? I definitely think that matchup with Closed and Deep Thought, for sure.
Yeah, for once, the matchups in Division 4B are actually really interesting. H-Town against GRH will face off against each other in an American matchup, the only one. We've got 16 Americans in this league, and this is going to be the only matchup against Americans in Pennsylvania. They'll decide who will move back up into contention for the playoff spots and who will probably stay closer to the bottom. That one weird girl still hasn't picked up any points so far this season, but in an American stay against Steven, who's not had the most amazing season so far, she might be able to pull through and finally get her first points. And as you said, Closed against Deep Thought is this week's game at the top of the table. And that will probably be very important going forward to decide who will get that spot. And yeah, Ed will also want to get a win against Papagato to not only keep himself at the top of the table, but also to keep Papagato away from it.
Very nice. Simi.
Yeah, I'll definitely look for the Ghost and Defaults matchup. You could plausibly see a draw there, which would give Ed Boris some space to close out on those two. Although neither of Ed Boris or Papagato are American, so we don't know what the result would be up there. Really interesting to watch, definitely.
Indeed. Well, it'll be very interesting given this will be the first leg in the home stretch for Division 4. And let's take a quick look before we finish at the map they will be facing off in. It is Pennsylvania, created by Elemental 921. It has an average score of 9,659. It's been played almost 2,000 times and has over 10,000 locations. The map description just simply states that it has a map coverage of every corner of the state. So they'll be looking to not be able to eliminate any corner from contention. So yeah, what are you expecting here from Pennsylvania, Calamity?
Yeah, honestly, if I had to compare Pennsylvania to any of the countries we've played so far in the 1.5 season of Reddit League we've had, I'd have to compare it to France, which might sound a bit weird, but for both of them, there's not a lot of useful information you can learn to help yourself. Phone codes might give you a general area, but beyond that, you're looking at trying to find a sign with a highway or a bigger city you recognize. And without those, you'll be left with having to comb the map for any information you've found, though in the case of Pennsylvania, the chances of finding what you're looking for are a bit higher than in France.
Indeed, it's geographically very kind of similar, except for a few odd places, and lots of back roads that aren't exactly labeled as well. So even though it's America, it could pose its own unique challenges. Simi.
Yeah, I definitely understand Calamity's point about comparing to France. It has a very European road structure, if you understand what I mean. It's very kind of chaotic and spread out. Fortunately, it also has somewhat distinct landscape profile for the western, central, and eastern halves. So you can draw some conclusions from that, as well as Calamity mentions, remembering the phone codes, larger cities, locations of state highways. All those are possible, but it's not going to be definitely nearly as practice dependent as last week's map was.
I see. Well, definitely be a relief to many players with a Latin alphabet in English, as most of the players are at least somewhat familiar with the language. So it'll be a little bit of a relief for them on that. Yeah, thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next time in one of the matchups we have in Pennsylvania. And so we'll see you then. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.